until this moment, it was never my decision to leave. I think even if I had the chance, I would try to go back and continue using photography. On Saturday morning, we the day started with machine guns and heavy gunfire in the center of the city, and we thought it would be a couple of hours before this is over. I stayed in Khartoum alone in my apartment for 2 weeks. But then there was no electricity, no water, no food, and it was starting to become more and more dangerous. And stray bullet hitting the windows and doors and so on. And on the way, it was sad to see. In just 2 weeks, the city became a ghost town. You start to see the dead bodies on the street. It was bad.
Host, and I'm here today with a very special guest to me. All of you know that I'm Sudanese, and we have been experiencing a very tough experience right now with war. Someone with me today is Ala. He is a photographer that I've been a huge fan of. So I'll let him introduce himself. Ala, who are you?
I think to answer who are you is a very difficult question.
Okay.
But
What
in
do you
short,
do?
in short, I am a Sudanese born in Darfur, and simply I would say someone who uses photography as escape and as a tool of self-expression. And also I think it's the right tool through which I try to see the world around me. I am from Darfur, but I grew up in Omdurman, and I'm still connected to both places. And yeah, I think that's in short who I am.
Great. I'm very happy to meet you. Today is the first time we met, Ala and I, but I've been following him, loving his work and his journey. It's interesting that you said you're from both places. Do you feel like you belong to both Omdurman and Darfur?
I think living in different places allows one to be more of a researcher, trying to connect to places, trying to connect to people, trying to use memory as a way of looking at things. And I think the fact that I keep on going back to Darfur, and also the fact that most of my photographic projects and narratives are somehow geographically based in Khartoum, makes my interpretation of Khartoum, Sudan, and Darfur in general kind of different. There is connection, there is disconnection, there is that feeling of wanting to know more and wanting to connect more. And I think photography allowed me to connect on a deeper level with both places, Khartoum and also a few locations in Darfur, and I think Sudan in general. I think without photography, I would not have been so interested or so engaged with the idea of being a Sudanese.
Very interesting. Do you think you picked photography because of your travels, of your feeling that you belong to both places but not really fully belonging? Because I know in Sudan, just for context here, some people really, really love one, like in every place, they belong to one city or to one tribe, and they defend that narrative, and the house I grew up in Sudan is my grandmother's house, and they sell the house and moved to Umdurman. But my mom still stayed in Medani, and I remember sitting there out of nowhere. I'll look at my friend. I said, "I'm going to Sudan," and she looks at me and she said, "You are in Sudan," and I'll be like, "Oh, I mean, I'm going to Medani." It's a funny thing
It is.
that I could not, as everyone in Omdurman looked like me. And yet I did not belong to the city. I knew that deep down, right? So I've always wanted to go back to Medani, even though the house that I grew up living in Medani no longer existed. But I had this like need to be in Medani all the time, right? I don't know if you felt the same. Did you feel the same towards both places? Like right now? Which one you want to go
Right
back to?
now, I think to go back to what you mentioned just now, I think it's a general case because of most families are moving from the countryside to Khartoum or to Omdurman, mainly looking for a better future for the kids, work
Mm,
opportunities, and so on and so on.
mm,
So it's easy to feel that Omdurman to many Sudanese people is just, or Khartoum to many Sudanese
mm,
people is just a temporary place, and there's always that sense of going back home and so on.
mm,
But I've lived in Omdurman for so long that I'm also attached to it. I
mm,
think there is that sense of monogamy when I think of both places. Um, it's difficult to choose one over the other, but I think I have different kind of connections and feelings in each place,
mm.
and that even extend to places that I did not live in for long. I think with photography, the attachment to places and people is different. I think it allows you to connect quicker and to favor places based on maybe something as simple as experience, as simple,
Yeah.
few days of trip to that particular place. So at this moment, maybe because I'm away from Sudan, I miss the country overall. I miss
Mm,
the idea of being able and free to travel around, to connect to people, to get to know Sudan. I always think I know Sudan, but traveling more, you see more, you know more, and
mm.
that's something I wish I could go back to doing. Maybe one day after this war ends.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah. I love this. You know why? Because to me, you found home in many places, not just in one. And
Yeah,
that's a luxury. That's a luxury not everyone is
I
aware of.
totally
That's why,
agree.
yeah, not everyone is aware of. I've always thought I have a friend who really didn't like living in many places, and I thought, but like, maybe I get bored easily. So maybe it's a weakness I have. I agree with you in finding home in many places. That's the reality of life. And we've seen it in many, many, many situations, like our Prophet. He was born in Mecca, loved Mecca dearly, but he found a home in Medina, right?
Mm,
Across history, many historic, pioneers always travel, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I love that right now we have the luxury of photography. For example, we're so good at it. When I look at one of your pictures, oh my God, it's the full story. It's a superpower,
Thank you.
right? And I've always loved photography. My hands are too shaky for it, but but I enjoy it the most, right? And
Mm.
sometimes I just like do it with my phone, and after I do it, oh, I feel so proud. Like there's a photo that I took a couple of days ago. I saturated it way too much, but it was good. I loved it. For me, it was good, right? And I
Well,
could look going
photography
back to, okay.
is very rewarding. It's addictive. It's rewarding, and
Mm-hmm,
I think it doesn't matter when do you start, but as long as you start, I think it's
mm-hmm,
one of um, one of art fields that will change a lot of your perspective, how you see things, how you see the world, how you interact with the world, and the deeper you go into it, the deeper you get connected to the idea of using simple pictures
mm-hmm,
to talk about things, talk about people.
mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
fun, and I advise you continue. Don't stop, even with your phone.
Inshallah. With my phone, I'll continue. I
Yes.
love it. Sometimes I see, and because also I told you I'm a screenwriter. I'm really interested in making films myself, and I think you and I have a lot of people who travel a lot and coming from unique places do have a unique narrative that they
Mm,
feel obligated to tell, even if it's the same story that has been told over and over, like a story of war, right? Having this unique narrative or different narrative is important to be told. That's why I keep meeting people like you, and that's why I keep writing. And in my brain, since I was a kid, I see things as scenes, like how you see things as pictures. That's how I see them. That's why
yeah.
I am connected to photography, because I look at the photo over and over and over, right? And I just keep, and you sent me like really great pictures, and we'll be talking about them. One of them really speaks to me. I'll tell you which one, right? And that's how I see things. That's why I love photography. We're gonna take this conversation to my question, which is, if I'm writing a feature film about you, what do you think the opening scene would be? The first scene.
I did think about this a little, and I think something that could somehow represent me of a very wide scene of me walking around somewhere um, plain, somewhere with not so much elements of whatever, somewhere
Mm,
that you cannot distinguish from, you cannot tell where that place is, but you can see there's a landscape, there's me walking, and I think that somehow represents how I wander into new places. I love to discover new places. I love to go into places I already know, and I think
mm,
a scene like that somehow uh, start to inform the viewer of how I try to navigate life.
mm. Traveler who also a player with the element around him. Do you see yourself in that scene as your current self or like a child or younger self? Who which Ala who's there? The boy, the teenager, the adult
No,
we're
I,
talking
I
to?
think I think the adult
The adult. Mm,
having some kind of knowledge
mm,
changes a lot the way you see things, and I think um, I would enjoy simple things more as an adult than my
mm,
younger self. My younger self, I did have a happy childhood, but
mm,
I would say I like looking at things with understanding. That's why I would choose an adult over a younger child.
mm. Interesting. What are the things that you looked at without understanding when you were a child from Sudan?
Mm. I think one of the things that I used to do a lot as a young boy is to go to the river. Um,
Mm,
I did not understand exactly what was the attachment, but just looking at a large body of water,
mm,
um, it has that feeling. And I think for someone young, it's hard to talk about what feeling is that. What are you talking about? What are you looking at? But but physically being there as someone young, I remember going to the river with my bicycle, and sometimes with my
mm,
friends, sometimes alone, and it's just.
mm,
I think at that age, you think of the feeling of liberation.
mm.
It's hard to describe what was it exactly, but it's something I used to enjoy doing without really understanding what or why.
Which river you went to? The Nile, the white, the blue?
Mostly because I lived in Omdurman, it's mostly the White
Uh,
Nile.
the white Nile.
Yes.
Mm. Just you took me because I lived beside the blue one.
Uh,
Um, yeah, we're connected, and I think something about the river is revolutionary somehow.
yeah.
Like you cannot. I know sea sound like when people talk about sea and oceans and like storms there, they think of a big and mysterious. But with the river, sometimes the river looks calm and you don't know what comes next. It's such an
Hmm.
expected body of water, and it it had, as much as I loved the Nile, the Blue Nile, it scared me, right?
Yes.
It scared
Yes.
me even
Yes.
to touch it. But beside the beach or a sea, I would be okay to be there, like, to walk by it a little bit wet. But I always felt like it would take me. I had this, but I
Well,
enjoyed
I
it.
think especially the blue, White Nile, and the Nile.
Mm,
Visually, it looks a lot calmer than the currents, and I
yes,
think when you start to swim in the Nile, then you start to appreciate the power.
of it.
Um, Ironically, I my first job, no, actually my second job,
Mm,
uh, I I did work in a ship, oil and gas ship, and we used
mm,
to spend weeks in the ocean. It
yeah,
never felt as scary as trying to swim in the Nile as a boy.
you want to. I
It
know
won't.
because,
It won't.
yeah, the same. I love your first scene. Um, I still feel like somehow it goes back to the theme of belonging, right? Because and I think a lot of Sudanese have I wouldn't call it a crisis, but I think a lot of us have this feeling, right? Where do we belong? And what is our identity? And we were talking about Goodbye Julia, right? And that film really touched on that in a brilliant way, in terms of like the vast identities, languages, experiences, religions in the country, right? That was used against us instead of us embracing it, and led to many, many, many unfortunate events that you and I are aware of it, right? When you say that, and you say it like you don't want the scene to have elements, as much as I love it, I felt like you have this fear of being labeled to one place.
Maybe that's the way to look at it.
Is it? It's not your way.
not, it's not. It's not really. I don't want to be labeled to one place,
Mm-hmm.
but I like the idea of being open to accept any space,
Mm,
regardless of my previous
mm,
attachments or being somewhere new. I'm not afraid of changing space. You can. I think this is a better way to look at it.
You're adaptable.
Yes.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, what's your next scene? I think like we'll connect this. What's your next scene? What's your next photo?
It has to be from somewhere in my hometown, Darfur.
What's your
Somewhere I
hometown?
love.
Tell us this
I
name.
lived. I lived. I was born in Niala.
Niala. Oh, I have a best
Niala,
friend
yes.
from there. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And I think the next scene will be from Al Wadi, which is a seasonal river that crosses the city. And my home is 3 blocks from there. During dry season, it's like a sandy beach with
Mm-hmm.
tall trees,
Yeah.
and during rain season, it's just another river.
Yes.
And I did not actually share one of the pictures of that place with you, but I can send you a picture of it.
Okay.
I think that would be my next scene. And it's like a space that I would love to keep going back to.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. You described it. You brought me back to Medani, because I don't know. Again, I don't remember names of places, but I remember that we had the place we go to called Barona. I don't know if you've
Oh
been
yeah,
there.
yeah, I know Barona.
It was one of the
With the little
mysteries.
monkeys and everything.
Oh my god, they steal your food. Attack you on the street.
But you
Yeah.
you know that this is a man-made forest. It's not natural.
It yeah, it's not natural. It's man-made, and
Mm.
it had like it was like a zoo, some sort of like a wild zoo, and then
Yes,
it was
yes,
abandoned, and the monkeys stayed. Like, for context for
yes.
people, and we used to go. It was like a picnic for us, so we used to go. And again, in the rainy season there is a river, and during
Mhm,
dry season there is no river and there is sand. And I just remember playing in the sand. So you took me to that
mhm.
memory, and I was like, wow, we some sort had the same experience. This is very
Yes, different
interesting.
places, same experience.
Yes.
Yes.
Also traveling, and I'm like, wow, that's why, oh my gosh, that's why I love doing this podcast, because I meet so many people, and then we have those scenes that are
Connections.
they're so beautiful, and that's why I love traveling as well. So you said you would love to go back to Niala.
Mhm.
So let's talk about you leaving Niala. Were you in Niala when the war started, or were you in Umdurman, and how? Tell me about the journey.
Um, my family moved to Khartoum when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But the real connection with Niala is we spend the holidays back home, the school holidays. So we have 3 months a year,
Mm.
and those usually are the most beautiful times of my life. And that's why I'm still connected to the place. When the war started, I was in Port Sudan, in the Red Sea.
Mm.
Um, but at the beginning of the year, actually at the end of 2022, I started a project called Darfur, Maybe Home Again.
Mm.
And in this project, I'm trying to look at Darfur after 20 years of war, try to reconnect to places I lived in, but also try to understand Darfur through photography. I started to go to Nyala, Al Fashir, Jabal
Mm.
Mara,
Mm.
and the focus is mainly um, a personal experience, a guide through memory, uh, talks with relatives, uncles, and so on, and also linking it to the humanitarian situation in Sudan after 20 years of conflict.
Mm.
2023 marked the 20th year of conflict in Darfur, and the sense or the feeling that we had, the expectation that we had, was very different to that for Darfur. We expected that people are starting to move on, so they
Mm.
started to live. The countryside started to be alive again. More
Mm.
farms are operational. People are going back to the villages, and in April it all went back to square zero. And a lot of us talk about the conflict, how it affected Khartoum, Madani, and most parts of central Sudan. But the war had a bigger humanitarian impact in Darfur, because
Oh.
you're talking about people who experienced war and conflict for the second time in their lives.
Mm.
During that project, I did go to camps where people lived for 20 years, two
Mm.
generations living in the same house. And I'm still trying to reconnect with those I talked to early in 2023. And the majority are living in refugee camps in Chad right now, in Adri.
Mm.
So
A second
it's
displacement.
a second displacement, a more extreme one, and even violence uh, is quite extreme compared to the original Darfur conflict. In terms of numbers, I think many people uh, do not understand how populated Darfur is, and I think it is the most populated region in Sudan. And for example, in terms of populations, Niala is the second populated city in the country.
Mm.
Al Junaina is one of the big cities in Sudan as well.
Mm.
And imagine a whole city is displaced.
Mm.
Al Junaina is displaced, Niala is displaced, um, Zalinji. Uh,
Displaced.
in the whole region at the moment,
Mm.
only Al Dain and Al Fashir is still somehow inhabited. The rest are almost ghost towns, and that's huge.
I'm absorbing. Um, how how did you feel as someone from Darfur living in Durman? I know as a child you probably did not know the extension of the crisis in Darfur, but you know you're from there, right? How did it feel like? Because right now I'm living this. I'm living in a community that doesn't care about Sudan. As simple as that.
Mhm.
You tell them the story, they're like, oh, how sad. I hope everything goes well. I'll pray for you. But
No
you can
connection.
tell. You can tell. And it's very frustrating, you know? It's super frustrating because it's so important to you, but you need to continue going. You can't like call in sick, let alone calling sick. You cannot like delay your bills and be like, hi, just because I feel bad about my people in
Mhm.
Sudan. For them, it's just because, right? They don't, and that's a postponed trauma response because you have to keep going. As someone like has has such an emotional trauma within you, right? And survival guilt of being safe. Like sometimes I tell myself, I wish I was there, experiencing it, watching it happen, and being safe is just like sometimes I feel detached from my body because my body has to function, but my brain, my
Mhm.
heart is in agony, right? And I think again, going back to childhood and adulthood, where you just said about being a child, you don't understand. For me, when I was a child, I was like, we're all Sudanese, I just thought that how big the gap between people in the north and the south, people in Darfur, I did not understand that. I even didn't understand how deep is. I look at it as a division, you know? I understand how deep it was. But for you as a person with that identity living in the north, how did it feel like growing up in Omdurman?
Well, to be honest, when you think about the Sudanese uh, sense of society, politicians used a lot of differences in Sudan to divide and conquer. I've traveled to all parts of Sudan, and to be honest, all the country is suffering equally. Some areas in the north are actually even worse
Darfur.
than Darfur and
Mm,
then South Kordofan. Um, the Sudanese citizens are going through same sense of feeling, suffering, but politicians are playing a very negative role in using some of our differences um, to gain, to gain places, people, land, and so on.
mm,
Um, the whole country is actually suffering, and as a child, to be honest, I did not think about it that much. Um, in Omdurman, we lived in communities where you'll find people from all parts of Sudan,
mm,
and it was really something you really think about when you're young. You start growing up and you start thinking about politics, representation, so on. And the mess up is mainly by few elites who are trying to run the country in a way that it will never function.
mm,
The conflict in Darfur is basically a conflict between farmers and nomads.
mm,
They managed to turn it around to make it more political and to start to talk about it more from Arabs and African perspective, and
mm,
that's an issue. And I think the same way Sudan lost South Sudan, um, these dialogues will divide the country
mhm,
further.
mhm,
Even for example, South Kordofan got separated, Darfur got separated. They will use the same dialogue and separate the whole country even further. Um, as an adult, I would say that the story of Darfur uh, is very similar to the story of South Kordofan, similar to South Sudan, similar to what happens to Al Manasir in North Sudan,
mm,
similar to the extreme poverty that's going on in the East. It's a story of a group of people who did not know how to run the country, and unfortunately, the simple public are the ones who are paying the price.
mm. Is this how you see it?
Yes,
And how
group of people, graduates from the University of Khartoum or army.
I don't know why I'm laughing. It is the hard funny truth, right?
Yes, yes,
It is the
yes.
hard fun truth. Um, when did you start being aware of that? Because you said as a child you weren't, and there's comes the consciousness of this. Did it start when you? Because I feel like I'm just gonna say it. Most Sudanese men, the moment they go to university, it just happened. This awareness of politics, you know. And I remember at some point when I was in med school, we had like some volunteering experience as medical student, and the people who came from Khartoum University were all women, and I'm like, where are the guys? And they were like, they're busy in politics, you know. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're supposed to be doctors.
Yes, yes,
You know what
yes,
I
yes,
mean?
yes.
Like, can the people who study
Especially the
politics,
University of Khartoum.
especially the University of Khartoum, right?
Yes, yes.
And I remember watching the podcast Fingan. Oh no, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. But you probably watched that podcast episode. God, what's his name? But he was talking about the fact that Sudan is suffering from the elite educated people who just keep
Yes.
coming with these theories. It's either
Yes,
the
yes,
elite,
yes.
right, who comes up with these
Or the
ideology,
army.
or the army. There's no in between.
Yes.
Someone who
No,
studies
nothing.
this need to sit down and actually lead the country the way countries are should be led. People in politics should be in their place. People in the economy should be in their place. Doctors, just keep to your hospitals, for God's sake. Like, you
Thank
know,
you, thank you. I You wouldn't believe that. I mean, how many political parties exist in Sudan?
I would.
That number is.
It's insane.
I can't remember, but I think it's above 50.
Yeah. Mhm. Yes. Yes.
Above 50 political parties in less than 40 million people population, or 45 million. That's too
Everyone who
much.
think of a good idea, right, read a good book, they will make a political party thinking that they'll fix the
Yes,
country.
yes.
That's not how it works. That's not how it
Not at
works.
all.
No,
At all.
no, no. I'm not that 20-year-old. It doesn't happen that way. We need experienced people in this to lead the
Yes.
country. That's what we need, right?
But
So,
back to your question,
mm,
I'm not really. Um, I hate politics. I avoid any form of political debates or whatever.
yeah.
Um, with photography, I look at the human side of things, human experiences, and that's when you start to think about causes. And
Mm,
sometimes in other countries it might link to politics sometimes, but in Sudan it's always linked um, to why things are like so.
mm,
And one of the patterns you start to notice is that it's always because of uh, someone else's ideology.
mm,
People suffer the consequences of war, of separation, or just being ignored in a corner of the country. And what's crazy about Sudan is actually the most beautiful places in the country are war zones. I've been to some parts of South Kordofan, to the borders of Blue Nile,
mm,
to the mountains, Jabal Marra.
mm,
I've been to the far north, Jabal Ewanat,
mm.
and there's so much potential, not only in terms of what the land can offer, but you're talking
Tourism.
about communities of farmers who love, being farmers, and that's something rare, to
Mm,
find people
mm,
who are farmers who are there. It's a huge potential.
mm,
Tourism is one, and there's a lot more under the ground as well.
mm.
But if we just go to the first point, get those people to do what they love, to farm, get them the stability. It's just amazing what could be the outcome.
I agree.
And simply, if the politicians and the army took two steps back, um, it would be different. I remember the 90s, when before the war in Darfur, going back during holidays in Darfur, Niala was much better than Khartoum.
Mm,
It's full of, what you call it, prosperity.
mm,
People are happy, people are working. There's trade. Niala exports to Chad, Central African Republic, and all the way to Cameroon as well.
mm,
So it's crazy that actually people did not need politics in their lives. Things were going well. There were conflicts between farmers and nomads, and there were ways to solve them. The elders would get around,
mm.
and it's solved in no time. But when politics
Started.
are in the game, it becomes war.
Mm. Yes, of course, I think when I started like being aware Darfur conflict was already there. I loved what you said. Um, I think when you were talking about that all parts of Sudan are suffering, I just comparing it to countries I've been to without naming names. I've been to many places, but you always see that pattern of two cities that are very popular in the country and very nourished and well populated and opportunity of jobs. And then you see the far areas, the far cities, the far villages that are functioning, but they lack facilities. They might have some crisis, etc. But it never crumpled down to the point of how Sudan is crumbling right now, or crumbled already, right? And I always thought to myself, when there was a conflict in the south, and then the south separated, and I was in Sudan, I was in med school there, and I remember what happened. I remember the southern vote and all of it. I remember it, and I thought to myself, maybe it's gonna be controversial here, but I thought to myself, maybe this is good. Maybe now they got their rights, and we were taking, because everyone were saying our south, and I'm thinking to myself, doesn't the south belong to the southern people, not us? I understand the point of having a whole country united, but if that country cannot unite, can they just go and do their thing because they feel like neglected, right? Of course, I can't speak. I'm not, again, I am with specialists saying the talk, not me, and I'm no specialist here. I go with my feelings and emotions, right? And what I know about life. But that's how I felt then, and I was like 20 years old, right? I was like, if they want to have it, because we're not, the central government is not doing what they're doing, maybe they need, like, their own government and to do things. And I don't know if that's proved right or wrong at the moment. It's their say, again, to talk about their country right now. But I always had this question: why us? Why Sudan? And why Sudan has to suffer in silence? Why no one knows about us? Why no one knows that we speak Arabic? And how did we come to speak Arabic? Why no one knows that? I remember I was talking to a linguistic prof, and he said we have over 300 languages in Sudan before separation. And I thought to myself, why am I not speaking one of those languages? You know what I mean? And then I asked
Well,
my mom, I said, does my grandmother speak her language? And she said, for context, my grandmothers are Tanagala. My dad is Kahli Araki. So I understand maybe the people in Medellin or speak Arabic, they don't have any tribal language, but I understand why the people coming from the north did not speak. And my mom said, oh, she doesn't speak it. Right now I know why. But, I always think to myself, when I go out, when I say I'm from Sudan, they're like, where's Sudan? I'm like, we were a very big country. We have the
yes.
Nile. We have pyramids. And I become this lunatic person. I'm pretty sure
It's
it's
crazy.
funny.
Yeah, crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But I think to understand Sudan,
Mm,
and that's where my next interest started kicking in.
mm,
You'll start to read about history, because
mm,
history is the only way to understand why things are the way they are right now. And the history of Sudan is so crazy and untold, and also unrecorded. You'll start to think about how the Sudanese culture is formed. What does it mean to be an Arab and talk Arabic? Because there's a big debate in Sudan right now. There's always been this debate about, are we Arabs, are we Africans?
mm,
And I find that question is, to some extent, is invalid. I think we tend to forget about our small identities. We don't study them, we don't promote them, and that's why we ended up lost, because at the end we try to present ourselves as someone else's culture.
mhm,
Sudan is very rich in culture, languages. The 1800s, there was quite a shift in Sudan, how Sudanese people think. But when we go long time ago, before the Turkish arrived, or before even Islam,
mm,
the way the area functioned, trades and routes, how people are connected, how the kingdoms are connected, it will give a proper understanding of how Sudan, as group of smaller kingdoms, functioned. At
mm.
that time, it was not Sudan we know, but
Yes.
there were sultanates in Darfur,
Mm,
there were sultanates in Sinnar. There were the north of Sudan, the Nubians.
mm,
Ethiopians were there as well. The South Sudanese, they had very strong culture. South Sudanese tribes. When you look at important things in Sudan culture, for example, Azar. Azar was invented by Nilotic tribes in South Sudan, and then exported to the rest of the world. There's very little that is told about Sudan history, and as young Sudanese, I think we are not aware of where we came from. We don't know our history. And also Sudan, that Islamic element, it promoted speaking Arabic more. We mix up between religion, language, tradition. and culture. I grew up in Sudan in a time where it was not nice when you speak non-Arabic language. They say you are Ratani, as if it's a taboo thing.
It is a taboo.
We are not proud of our native languages, and a lot is lost. I think maybe 1 out of 10 Sudanese should speak a native language, but it's actually disappearing. I am from Darfur, and I don't speak any of the Darfur languages. There are so many, and I wish I could. I tried to, but the rate and how quick these things are disappearing is just scary.
Sad.
And I think it will erase us from the map even more. We have the chance, especially through arts, to tell a different version of Sudan. And I think that will be the time when we start to shine, we start to be known. At the moment, we are presenting a version that is
not
linked
ours.
to certain culture, is not ours. And that's something we need to think about, and we need to teach our kids about. Especially with this war, there's even a bigger chance of
disappearing. And destroying of history and the very little data we already have and culture that's preserved in the museums is being destroyed as we speak, if it's not destroyed completely, right? So why do you think, from your perspective, why do you think we weren't proud of this? Why did we, other than the taboos, why do you think there's not anything preserved in data? Right now when I was taking a break from my podcast, the reason I do podcasts with certain people is because I wanted it to be somehow saved, right? As a stories.
And that's very important.
And this is very important, right? The reason I want to write films is because I want it to be saved for people to come back and say, this is her experience as someone with that identity. And it's not about my legacy. It's more about for the people who would have the same identity to go back and know what I went through and what the people like me went through, honestly, not some faked history made up so people can follow whatever agenda is to be followed, right? So what I feel about Sudan, all this information, all this rich history that we should be proud, was kept hidden on purpose. We only know what we've been told.
The question you asked is actually very important and critical. I think lots of what's happening in Sudan, I don't want to blame or point fingers, but since independence, the general direction through which Sudan is governed and the modern Sudanese culture is created, it feels that people who went outside and got educated and came back to Sudan, they went to Egypt, UK, US, and so on. Their ideology formed the basis on which modern Sudanese culture is formed. The what we study in schools, history, and the culture in the center formed a way in which you, as a young Sudanese, should be. we go back to the same point of the elites. I
Mm.
think the ideology through which those people formed the country was somehow, it does exclude lots of what Sudan is about. And I think I always read in books the story of Al-Azhari as a leader and how he decided to instead form an alliance with the African. That time there was no African Union, but there was a union of African leaders based in Addis Ababa and led by Haile Selassie.
Mm-hmm.
But instead he decided to go to Jamiat al-Dawla al-Arabiya and set the name of Sudan there. And countries like Lebanon even refused. Why are we having a black country here?
Yeah.
But
I remember the story. Very, very shameful story. Yeah.
um, but modern Sudan was formed, excluding connections to Africa
Africa.
and African culture. And when you look at archives of Sudanese television,
Mm.
theater, music, it was always trying to link up north and east instead of the logical south and west.
Mm.
Um, this changed a lot of how we functioned and how we grew up as Sudanese people, and it does somehow affect us today. And it's difficult to answer the question of what does it mean to be a Sudanese today? How does it feel? What are we trying to present and represent? We are not aware of
Mm.
our culture in a proper way, and of course, we are very vaguely educated about Africa as a continent.
Mhm.
And I think the average Sudanese man and woman know almost nothing about Africa and the African continent, and that's shameful.
I agree. I agree with every word, right? Because I'm always in a debate with someone, or I'm always. I remember just when you were telling this story, I just remembered a friend sending me a TikTok video about a Sudanese young man who responds to someone that says we're not Arabs, right? And he had like this proudful about connecting us to the Arab culture and heritage, right? And my friend was like, see,
Mhm.
we're more Arabs than them, and they think we're not Arab. And I'm like, gosh. I left the conversation. I'm like, okay, yeah, right. He did well.
There's no point here. The damage is huge. Too much to repair.
Literally, right? And that's a long discussion, really exhausting for me, even to and I love what John Garen. There is a quote, and I don't remember it. Forgive me, all John Garen fans. But
Mhm.
I loved what he said, that what is going to unite us is not us being Arabs or African, is us being Sudanese. Point. Period.
Yep.
And I agree. All we need to do is to understand that from north to south, we're Sudanese. Doesn't matter what is the
Yep.
language behind it, the culture. All of these are Sudanese culture. That's it. Accept it all, move on with it, and use it.
Exactly.
Use it.
Exactly.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the vast benefit if we weren't divided and fighting
The
with each
power.
other? The power we would have just in tourism. Forget everything we have. Imagine a tourist who would come to our country, traveling from the north to the south. Their experience as you, as a traveler, you go to other places and you travel Sudan. Very, very, very different weather, culture, how people look, how people eat, how people interact, how their homes are built from the north to the south. Very, very, very different. I just imagine this country being a tourist attraction only. And I forget about
Mhm.
any other resources, right? Because there's so many. There's so many,
Yes.
you know?
So rich.
So rich country, a very rich country, right? And that's the reason for its division as well, because the leaders are greedy as hell.
Yep.
Excuse my language. They are. They're greedy, right? And they're being guided by greed and proxy war, etc., to the point where we are no longer valuable as humans to them.
Mhm.
We're just
Yes.
numbers.
Instead of leading, it's just destruction. They are destroying.
Yes. And this conversation needs hours of talking about this, but I want to go back to you in the war. What happened when the war started? How did you feel? And what do you think is this war about right now? Just talk to me about the war so we can address the great photos you have that we can talk about them.
Well, I think we we basically knew that something will happen. The existence of two major powers in the center of the city in Sudan in general,
Hmm.
and it was clear that two captains will never steer the boat.
Yeah.
So the clash was about to happen, but no one expected it to be this extreme and this long. Um, when the conflict started in Khartoum, I was in Port Sudan enjoying the Red Sea. I love diving, so I was diving in the Red Sea.
Mm-hmm.
I came back to Khartoum on a Thursday, and on Saturday morning, we the day started with machine guns and heavy gunfire
Mm-hmm.
in the center of the city. And just like everyone else, I thought this is just another clash, just like the previous clashes that happened in 2022 and so on. And we thought it would be a couple of hours before this is over.
Mm-hmm.
And
Still
yeah,
going.
we kept on waiting. We are still waiting.
Cause
So
attacks that happened in April, was it 17 or 15?
15,
April
15 of
15, 2023. We are
yes,
recording this today on April 8th, 2024. And it is
yeah.
still going. How did
With
you,
no signs of it ending very soon.
with world silence, with people thinking this is just another war in Africa? This is just another crisis, refugee crisis coming from Africa. No one is thinking why did it start? Who is leading this? So let's go back to you flooding the country. When did you
Well,
decide to leave? Like how? Because you were waiting for hours, right? And then,
mm, until this moment, it was never my decision to leave. I think even if I had the chance, I would try to go back and continue using photography. But I live in Khartoum, and my parents live in Omdurman.
mm-hmm,
I stayed in Khartoum alone in my apartment for 2 weeks.
mm-hmm,
But then there was no electricity, no water, no food, and it was starting to become more and more dangerous. And stray bullet hitting the windows and doors and so on. I decided to go to Omdurman and be with my parents. So I crossed Khartoum during I would say a very tough time. 2 weeks, both sides started to have this, I would call it ceasefire. And
mm-hmm,
I chose one of the days in the ceasefire to travel to Omdurman, to
mm-hmm.
cross the bridge to Omdurman. And on the way, it was sad to see in just 2 weeks, the city became a ghost town. Uh, the signs of damage were not as strong, but when you start to see the dead bodies on the street, it was bad. I went to Omdurman. I spent some time in Omdurman.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost a month.
Mm-hmm.
Then I decided to go to Madani. Mainly, I needed to find work because it was already 2 months of war, no work. The city is becoming very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I needed to find work, and I needed to photograph as well. That's why I decided to go to Madani,
Mm-hmm.
do something for agencies, for the news, and so on, and on the side do my own photography.
Mm-hmm.
So I traveled to Madani. I spent a couple of weeks there, then back to Khartoum, then back to Madani. I traveled between Khartoum to Madani because my parents were still in Khartoum,
Yeah.
in Omdurman. And then I started to travel further. I went south to Kosti, and I went to Gadarif.
Mm-hmm.
And during this time, I just along the way I tried to take as much pictures I could. My main focus, I had the chance to do some war photography,
Mm-hmm.
people firing guns and so on. So, but that was never part of my interest. I always preferred to, even
Story.
in a time of war, to focus on people stories and how the general civilians are coping up during these tough times.
Mhm.
And I traveled most to the safer areas in the country, all the way from Halfa, the borders with Egypt, to Renk, the
Mhm.
borders in South Sudan. I've
Mhm.
been to Port Sudan and all the cities in between. And it was sad to see this is happening in a major scale to so many Sudanese people. The amount of people who were displaced inside Sudan is huge. And at the beginning, it was only Khartoum, people going back to their home countries, to their relatives or friends, and finding a place to stay with a family there or so. But when the numbers became so huge, people started living in schools,
Mhm.
abandoned houses, and in Madani, it was so sad to see people living in abandoned, chicken farms. And it was always sad to see this, but I think the worst feeling comes to mind when you start to meet people who you know, and to see them in these kind of conditions. It's just sad. It's just sad. So I kept on traveling, but then Khartoum became inaccessible. Omdurman became inaccessible, especially with someone who has a camera.
Mhm.
During this time, I've been harassed a lot by both sides, because both sides did not like journalists or photographers, and to cross a checkpoint, it was always a difficult thing. I had to sometimes pay the driver to hide the camera in the spare tire or so
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
Sometimes I give it to one of the ladies because I didn't search women. Sometimes they just find it, and it becomes another night in a checkpoint.
Mhm.
It was not easy. Uh, in September, I went to the borders with South Sudan. I started doing some pictures there, and then I decided to cross over to South Sudan.
Mhm.
I stayed in South Sudan for a while. Then I traveled back to Port Sudan. I documented some displacement there. Then back to Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, and at the moment I'm in UAE. Um, I'm trying to find a way to go to Chad,
Mhm.
because I think not so many people talk about the displacement in Chad and how people are suffering. And this is the state I'm in now, finding access to Chad.
Why do you travel? Is it just your photography? Like, here's why I'm asking the question. Someone like you, who's probably doing photography for so long, and you have been featured, right? And I just feel like you already networked well. You already know people to find a place to find any job and settle down. Just be safe. Why do you continue? Like, someone who's watching this, right, would expect, okay, this man is stayed in an apartment, and this is the scene I'm seeing. You're in your apartment, no electricity, you have limited access to water and food, and you can still hear the fights, right? You can hear the bullets, the missiles, the people being killed, right? And people fleeing, houses being destroyed after they're targeted. I'm sure you were thinking, maybe I'll be next, right? You've thought of that, of one missile coming into your apartment, and that's it for you. Why didn't you just flee, right? Why did you go coming back forth to Umdurman? I'm sure you have a family, but the what you just told me, I'm someone who seeks safety. It's just crazy.
Well, I
It's
think
crazy. And I know you have a passion of
it's
photography, but like, dude, there are many places that can be photographed, and I love my country. Right, but I'm thinking about right now, and I understand all the photographers who go to war zone, and there's war photographers, but you're looking for humanity. I understand the passion, but why? There's more to this than passion, because you can do your passion
yes, I
anywhere.
think anywhere else. I think I actually feel afraid to to be in the comfort zone of being somewhere safe, and slowly uh, stop telling the stories of Sudan, Sudanese people. I think as someone who can and have the access to um, get the world to know about what's happening to Sudanese people,
Mm.
not only the conflict, but what's happening to the people. Um, it's more than a duty. And I do talk a lot about this with my wife. I think I'm more afraid of leaving my kids with no one to support them than being afraid for my life. I try to be uh, as careful and cautious as possible,
Hmm.
but also I think it's more than a duty, and it's something not so many people could do, to talk about the war in Sudan. And this is not the first conflict in Sudan. Sudan have seen so many conflicts, and as someone who is interested in history,
Mm.
I know uh, the importance of documenting and getting people to talk about this later, even after this war stops. Um, this is something I can do, and I think my role as a Sudanese photographer
Mm.
who can engage with people
Hmm.
and get them to tell their stories, convey their feelings, and also in process convey my own personal story and my own personal feeling. This is uh, this is the thing that I would love to leave behind, not only for my kids or for myself, but this will be important part of Sudanese history, and I
Hmm.
hope it is something that we could learn from. Sorry, it's something that we could learn from, and it could be something that could unite us, could help us think about um, the consequences of um, being selfish. Because at the end, the war is being selfish enough to fight over something that could destroy everyone and everything around you. Because at the end, regardless of who wins this war, both sides are losers,
Mm.
and in the middle, um, the one who will suffer the most is the civilians.
Don't you think you're being selfish yourself towards your kids and wife?
I I do
I,
think about this.
I do ask
It's not
questions that are hard. So if you don't want to answer, that's okay.
it's not it's not easy to be in this condition,
Hmm.
and I think it is something that I think about a lot. Whether if I'm doing right now is selfish or maybe even stupid, or maybe it's the right thing. But to think about it in a deeper personal level, I think I would even feel even more guilty if I did not do it.
Hmm. You think it's more selfish to not do it?
Yes,
I respect that. I respect it. But as someone whose her
thank you.
father at some point joined the rebels in the south, and I was very young, I don't know if I forgive my father yet because he was away for too long. So I don't know if
He was
I.
a soldier.
He wasn't a soldier. He's one of those
Mm.
doctors who decided
Oh,
they can do something. I respect his decision, right? And he said he wants to uh, he wants to make the country better for us, right? But yeah, like he left. He left after 7 years, and I always thought he's just going to die. And I lived with that feeling and fear for years, right? I still carry it with me that someone I love would die. It's a trauma that just it doesn't go away. At least not for me, right? That nevertheless, I understand as a curator, as someone who's angry that no one knows what's happening or no one cares enough. This has been going for a year, right? And I still talk to some people who don't know that's going. right? It's just in the news, another crisis, another refugee. Everyone is like, are we just going to get these refugees, there's some Canadian response to it, it's a lot, it's a long topic, it's a big topic, right? That's why I wanted to speak to you, and I want to speak to as many Sudanese as possible, to like know each single narrative, right? And I understand the importance of that, of documenting it, right? And the dilemma within you as a father to protect the children who are your responsibility, and then your responsibility in your profession and your identity as someone who witnessed not just one war but two wars. And I think Sudan have been through so many wars, right, in different places. I'm someone who's privileged. When I visit Sudan, it was always the center of Sudan, and I didn't see anything with my own eyes. I've always heard stories, right? I have read, I've watched news, and I've talked to people who experienced war. But I am privileged not to live it. But I have the survival guilt, right? I think what you're doing is marvelous, and the time is spent away, right? The time is spent doing this. Maybe one day there'll be a prize that carries your name for all the work you did documenting this, in my opinion, because that's a lot. Like, I have so much admiration for you right now, because when I see a picture you took, it just speaks to me. Like one of the picture you sent, I always wonder, what is this person doing right now after you left? How
Which
are they?
picture is that?
Oh, let's share pictures. Let's talk pictures.
Well, actually, this slide is an old slide that I decided to share with you, but it talks about the beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
What I told you about going back and reconnecting with Darfur, and this image was one of the images I took in January 2023 in Jabal Marra.
This is Jabal Marra.
Yes.
Mm.
And this is actually a village called Sarong, one of the villages that were abandoned since 2012. There was extreme violence in 2012 that led many villages in the mountain to be abandoned. This was one of the villages that were abandoned, and people started coming back in 2018.
In 2018, and now
Yes.
they're displaced again.
Now, no idea, no connection, no phone network, nothing. So I don't know exactly what happened in Sorong. But I know the villages south of Sorong, people evacuated the villages and moved to Chad.
This is what you were talking about earlier, about people being displaced for the second time, I'm guessing. This is the one.
This is Al-Umda Adam, one of the people who helped me a lot during my search. And I just talked to him. He's a community leader. And this picture was taken in his house in Abu Shuk camp. Abu Shuk camp is one of the big camps in North Darfur, in Al-Fashir. He is the Umda. He came to the camp in 2004. And in refugee camps, you are allocated very small, land for you and your family. 20 years later, he's a grandfather now, and all the extended family, him, his daughters, and his grandsons are living in the same house, I can't remember how big was it, but it was basically like 2 rooms and some area in the middle. So he kept on cutting and dividing down the house so that the elder girls have their own spaces and he have his own space with the men. And in that small area, he lived with his sons and grandsons for 20 years. He still is in Al-Fashir. He did not leave the city yet. Al-Fashir is somehow okay. But being there for 20 years, it's just, he's seen so much. He told me so much stories about what happened to his people, how his brother got killed during the conflict while he was working in his farm. And yeah, it just tells you the the effect of war on people and on families. It's just extreme. He also told me a lot about what it means to be a community leader in a difficult time like this. Most of people in his village relied on him to get assistance. As a community leader, he had to know everyone in the camp who needs more help than the other. Try to be like a middle person between people who provide support, NGOs, and his people, and indirectly someone who manages people in the camp without being an employee. He's just one of the people there. And a community leader is a big name, but his house is just like any other house in the camp. He has the same suffering. His kids have to go and queue for water. He has to find work to feed his family.
I love this picture. I love everything about it. I love that he's walking. He's not in a still motion. It just speaks to what you just told about him being a community leader, which means he does a lot. You know, I when I saw it, I think about, does he rest? You know, also like the angle of the fact that he's there. There's some shadows and there's some sunlight. You know, everything, and then there's the sky. It's just a full story. It's not just the resilience that carries, but it speaks to what's happening there. With the traditional outfit, of course, of Imman Galabia. I love this picture very much. I love it. I love it very much. I think this is the picture that led me to following you. And I do believe I shared it.
Interesting.
I do believe I shared it because first of all, I'm a huge fan of Imman Galabia, right? And I'm just a huge fan of Sudanese outfits. And I remember going to my dad's village and seeing kind of like mud houses. Are they mud houses? I'm not sure. I don't want to call something that with not the right name, right? Because they're doing it for people who are supposed to know what is this. So I loved everything about it, the emotion in it, the shadows and the light with the sky, right?
Yeah, actually, I did take many pictures of him in different settings. But to me, what was always important was it's easy to shoot a beautiful portrait, but it's difficult to find the image that reflect not only how he is or what he is, but also how I felt toward him. Not only me, but the whole community gave him so much respect, and I was trying to find that in the picture. And I think among the many images that I took of him, this does him justice the most.
Yeah, I agree.
And it shows I like that my respect towards him is also somehow visible in the picture.
Yeah, I agree. It does speak leadership to him. You know, it does put him in that portrait. Okay, this picture.
This is also in South Darfur in a village called Otash. Otash is not far from Niala. It's also one of the villages that was abandoned, and all people left from this village to form a camp inside Niala town. The camp itself is called Otash as well, named after the village. It's a community of farmers, and it's an area known for dried tomatoes. I think they export to most parts of the country. At Otash, voluntary return started to happen in Otash since 2018, before COVID, long before COVID. And I did have the chance to go there often and because of my camera, the whole village knows me. So every time they see me, like, hey, the photographer is here. Try to look good.
Take good pictures. Very beautiful.
Yes,
And no matter how people are going through, they're like, can you take good pictures?
yes,
I love this,
yes.
the colors and everything about this is so beautiful. I think from here you can tell me which one you want to show, because I see there's like 31 pictures.
Yeah, I think we can go forward. I'll just keep on talking until I'll stop you on a picture. All these are actually a continuation of what I was shooting in Darfur, between people and what's happening, and stories of women who are, because most men were either left or killed during the conflict, and it's usually women who has to bear all the roles of running the family, finding work, and so on. Now going back to Khartoum, Khartoum has always been my photography playground. It is what I try to photograph more. And this image is actually by accident. I was shooting with an old film camera, and I did not wind the film enough to get the next picture. But when I developed the film, it was very interesting that the images is actually, it looks like it's one image. It's very much linked. Yeah. It is from downtown Khartoum, and it's one of the places that I've done so much photography in, mainly because of the memories and the feelings that I have of Khartoum when I was young. It felt quite different to go back downtown Khartoum as a young child from now. I think back then it was much more. It looked better, and it felt like as a child I want to grow up and get a job here just like my dad, to be downtown Khartoum and so on. I had so much respect for the lifestyle and how it looked like. But looking at it now, downtown Khartoum in after 2010, it's just like a broken down city. The economic collapse of Sudan was very clear, visible, and the city changed a lot. And it's one of the places I love going back to.
Yeah. I'm just going to be listening until there's something that really catches my attention. But this picture, it just, for me, the contrast between the two, this looks very calm in comparison to here. It gives me two feels. How about this one? Where is this?
On the first day of conflict, most of my equipments were at home. I was in not far from my apartment, but the only camera I had was a camera I got recently. It's an old film camera. I decided to take pictures that will somehow reflect what happened on the first day of conflict, and it was basically the sounds of gunshots started to become more and more strong about 9 a.m. And at that time, people already went to their work. It was a Saturday, but people who worked in the market, Saturday in the market is a busy day. And this picture was not far from the market. It was an area known for protests. As you know, since 2019, there's so much protests in Khartoum. But when the firing started to become more extreme, people started panicking and everyone is trying to rush home, shut down the shops. And I took this picture exactly at that moment where people started going crazy and going around. And this was the only picture I got from the 15th of April. And this is when I was trying to go from Khartoum to Omdurman.
That's the bridge.
I had to, yes, this is the bridge. And it is the busiest bridge in Sudan. And it was crazy to see this empty. And it was scary actually to walk along. But along the way, I found people who were trying to cross from Khartoum to Omdurman. I was just like this guy on the right. I have a small backpack. I took the most valuable things that I have, my hard drives, and I took one camera, one lens, my hard drives, and few clothes enough to keep me for a couple of days. And actually that was it. That was everything I had from Sudan was in that bag.
And you never went back to get anything, right? That's what you had, what you have from there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think this was taken on the third or fourth week in the conflict, because the clashes between both sides were so extreme, and the city is just, it was easy, to hear a bullet going over your head. I went to a hospital back in Khartoum that was run by Doctors Without Borders, and they were treating mostly people who have gunshot wounds or artillery explosion wounds, and it was mostly people who were just at home trying to hide from the war, and bullets like this end up in their bodies.
Oh my God.
And it was sad to see that on average, in that time, in average, they conduct like 100 operations a day.
Okay. This is very hard to hear, because, it's very hard for me to hear. I'm sorry. We're just going to go to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry.
So yes,
yeah, this one.
This guy, his name, I don't know him before. I never knew him before, but I met him at the hospital. He came with his friends. The bullet just now we saw was extracted from his leg. His name is Ala. Interestingly, same name.
Yeah.
I did take the picture when he was in the operation room unconscious. But ethically, I had to talk to him after the after he was awake. To tell him about. I took a picture and I wanted to use it to tell people what's going on in Sudan. But in a short time, we actually became friends. I'm still, connected to him.
Where is he now?
He left Khartoum. He went to Madani. Then he went to Gadaref. At the moment, he's in Gadaref. This was taken in the northern side of Al Jazeera. It's 20 kilometers from Madani. This was the abandoned chicken farm that I told you about. It is abandoned for 15 years. But since the city became full of IDPs, people found nowhere to live. Many people started living here. This is one of 10 hangars, and about 1,200 people live in these hangars. Since it was abandoned for so long, it was full of snakes, scorpions. It was very dangerous for children as well, but people had no choice. The lady in the left, her name is Khadija, Khadija Malik. She is from southern Khartoum, Al Ashari area. I met her also in these poultry farms, and herself and the lady on the right, like Amna. It was always amazing to see people, even though they're going through tough times, they are trying to help other people. They are not community leaders or anything, but with what they know or what they do, they help so many people under them. I knew Khadija from before the conflict, but Amna, I don't know anything about her. I just met her there, and she basically used to make food for most people in the camp. It's just she spent all day. That's what she used to be a cook while she worked in Khartoum in a small traditional food shop. But now in the camp, people donate money and bring her flour and so on, and she cooks for everyone in the camp.
And what Khadija did?
Khadija was trying to manage people, help people to find a place to live, find them the necessities, floor mats and so on, and also coordinate those who are sick and in need of medicine, try to find, through local organizations, try to find medicine for them, especially the elders who relied mostly on long-term usage of medicines like diabetic people and so on.
I think for Khadija, it's the look in her eyes.
Yeah.
They're burdened, but as if they're still on a mission. Very beautiful.
I met her. This picture was taken like right after I saw her, and the meetup was a little bit emotional because I know her from before. Suddenly, I see her by accident living here in this space. It was not easy.
No.
To continue just talking about how resilient people are and try to help each other. I have her name on one of my notes. I don't know how much, but she came to the clinic in the morning and she found that there is understaff. Doctors could not work well. People could not manage the reception well. So she suddenly started donating her time and she managed to sort out how this place functioned. And it was amazing. Like you come in for help, but instead you end up, helping so many people. It was amazing.
Amazing and beautiful.
Yes. One of the things that happened a lot in camps was different social and people are trying to help differently. And it was important, I think, as it got people more hope and get them out of the depression that they were going through. I shot this while a group of theater group from Khartoum who were also abandoned, or not abandoned, who were also residing in one of the schools in Wad Madani. They kept on going around to different IDP camps, conducting plays, entertaining kids and families, and also somehow trying to keep people engaged and pull them away from depression.
Yes, and for themselves too, to continue to do the things that they love, but with good mission to people.
Until today, they are doing the same in Port Sudan.
In Port Sudan. Do they have a
Yes.
name as a group?
They don't have a name. It's just a group of
Actors.
they have
Okay.
an association. Yeah, they have an association, and they got together and they kept on doing this.
Oh, one of the most beautiful pictures.
This was taken when UNICEF were moving children who lived in Al Maigoma. Al Maigoma, Dar Al Maigoma.
Yes, I do. It's an orphanage.
Yes, so
for children.
Yes,
just for context for people.
It was difficult to move the orphanage from Khartoum to Wad Madani because most of the children were very, very young, sometimes weeks old, and it needed lots of support to get this orphanage in Wad Madani operational. And this was taken on the day that they started moving the children there. But unfortunately, after Madani conflict, they had to move this again. And this time there was no second or third orphanage. And instead, most of the kids ended up staying in different families who decided to take in people just to foster. Not really adoption, but just taking groups of people.
Yes.
This was in Antub hostel. It was the biggest IDP camp in Wad Madani. Almost 3,000 people lived in the school, in the hostel, and they also had to evacuate and move south again after Madani was hit hard. I think the most difficult part was people did not realize how quickly war can change the way you think about life. Many of these women were actually in shock that suddenly, just 2 weeks after the war started, they had to queue to get food assistance. I did talk to them individually, and I think the main thing that they keep on saying that last month I never thought I would queue for food support.
No one does that. No one should expect that it happens.
This is one of the families that I enjoy talking to. The younger boy, his name is Muhammad. He's in the second grade with his elder sister Amna. His mother is Khartoum. They live in also a hostel in Port Sudan. They are all the way from not South Kordofan. They are from West Kordofan. This particular hostel I went to, it was mostly people from Kordofan and Darfur who ended up in Port Sudan with no clear plan of what to do next or where to go. But people kept on moving, especially women and children, trying to find somewhere safe because after witnessing so many people they know get killed, women raped, children just disappeared, mothers worry a lot and they start to think of traveling as further as possible from the war.
Yes.
From the second month of conflict, after the village was hit really hard, they just decided to travel as further as possible from the conflict areas. So they ended up in Port Sudan. I think the same stories goes for those twins. They are both from Niala, Suha and Suhaila. They are 12. I think by now they are 13 years old. They were 12 when I met them. They live with their mother and their younger brother. They went from Niala to Nuhud to escape the conflict in Niala. Then Nuhud was becoming very difficult. They went to Alubaid, then Kosti, then Madani, then Sinnar, then back again to Kassala, to Port Sudan, crossing in a month's period more than 2,400 kilometers. But what was amazing for me is the mindset that they had. It feels like I'm talking to someone who is really old and wise. They try to keep it together, keep it cool, and not to get their mother to worry about them. I think for someone at that age to think about their mother's feeling, it's just something else.
Remarkable. And how I'll just speak at this at the last, but this is just remarkable. And you can see the resilience in their eyes, and not just the resilience, they as if they know who they are still, even though they've been through so much trauma, in my opinion. How did they travel? Were they traveling on foot? Because I know traveling was very hard because people get killed, theft, or even like rape happens on the road, right? How do they travel?
Yes, they did tell me about the trips. They took from donkey carts to the back of lorries to buses, everything.
Everything
It was
to the
like
globe.
a never stopping journey. This is Ramah Musa. Her story is different. She used to study at the Red Sea University in Port Sudan. So she was already there in Port Sudan before the war started. And she was in her final year. Her family are from South Darfur, Buram. She lost contact with her family because of the connectivity. And she still lives at the hostel. Trapped to some extent as she cannot finish her degree because university is not operational. She cannot go back to Darfur because it's too dangerous. She's not connected to her family because there's no network. And we are talking about this, and until recently, she did not talk to the family directly, but she managed to talk to someone who left Buram, where she is from, to Chad. She talked to her friend who met her family in the past few months, and that was actually comforting to her to hear that her mom is fine. But imagine to be just suddenly cut off
From
family, yeah, with no clear understanding of what could happen next. It was hard for me even to ask her about what you're going to do now. She does not know what to do.
I can see the uncertainty in her eyes and feeling lost, because even though she somehow safe, she's not emotionally safe with the emotional support she's supposed to have. She's worried about whether her family is even alive or not, right?
Mm. And despite that, she is volunteering
Yes.
in her hostel, which also now hosts lots of Sudanese and non-Sudanese families.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as university students,
Mm-hmm.
they try to run things. They try to coordinate how the hostel functions, and there's a huge population of families, kids in that confined space. Um, those two women are actually from I think Niger. They used to study at the Niger. They used to study at the University of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when the war started, it was actually very near the university.
Mm-hmm.
So they just left. Group of girls. They just left, going mainly to Port Sudan because they thought that this would be the evacuation point, and that was true because most
Mm-hmm.
foreign countries evacuated
Of course.
their people from Sudan through Port Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
However, they were never evacuated.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed in a smaller hospital not far from where Ramah
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Understand.
used to stay,
Mm-hmm.
and actually a large group of Africans are still trapped in Port Sudan with no support from the government. Mainly, I think people at the moment are relying on the support of smaller organizations, and this war actually proved that smaller organizations work much more efficiently
Than governments.
than the larger organizations.
Yeah, I agree.
Then even than the UN agencies.
Yeah.
Hannah has a very complicated story. She is very young. She does not know exactly how old is she. She is South Sudanese. In 2012, there were complications in Upper Nile State
Mm-hmm.
in South Sudan. So she fled with her family to live in Khartoum.
Mm-hmm.
And in Khartoum, she used to live in, many South Sudanese live in abandoned homes
Yes.
and try to find smaller jobs and try to survive in those. That time she was a kid. And during this war, she fled Khartoum and she arrived again in the same camp that she moved to when she was very young from South Sudan to Sudan. This camp is called Sangur camp. I've seen so many camps inside and outside Sudan, and I would say that Sangur camp might be the worst camp I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
She lost um, both her children in a span of 1 week after she arrived in the camp, mainly because malnutrition and outbreak of diseases. But she is in extreme trauma, and she does not know that she's in extreme trauma. She is to lose two children in 1 week was too extreme. But she mentioned that this is the first time she has a room. She lives in a small hut, um, and this is the first time she has her own private place since she was born in the worst camp in the world.
My God, I don't know what to say. How how do these people? How are the people who are called government function in their brain to affect people's life to this extent, and they still keep going? I don't know what's driving them.
It's 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 hard to imagine that at the end these people are their responsibility. You
They are.
decided to govern. This becomes your responsibility, but they simply don't care.
They don't.
And these people I meet are just, you can say, a small percentage of so many stories. It's just crazy. The camp I'm talking about at the moment,
Mhm.
It's supposed to. It was designed um, to host about 7,000 refugees.
Mm-hmm.
Now it has almost 20,000 refugees.
And they're not even addressing that, No
No,
one is addressing this, basically. It's
no
like
one. No one is
it's
talking about
swept under the rug. Very frustrating.
it. And this is Natalina, is also in the same camp
Mm.
as Hannah, Msongur camp. Um, this was during rain season,
Mm.
and it rained after this, and it was very difficult actually to go from her house to the main road. And I just could not believe that many of them actually feel much better now they are in the camp. It's a very difficult place to live in, but they really value the value of safety. They have seen so much. She talked about how she saw when soldiers raided her village. She was about 8 or 9 years old. She have seen her. She have seen them killing her relatives not far from them, and to escape from South Sudan to Sudan, they have to walk over dead bodies. It's
Heartbreaking.
this picture I took on my last trip outside Sudan through coastal border, and this image was during the time that the conflict in um, West Kordofan and South Darfur was in its peak. This is not actually a camp. This is a small clearing area um, right behind the borders, and it is a place where most people just rest in for a little bit before going deeper into South Sudan. Um, during this week, when I was there, an average of 3,000 South Sudanese and Sudanese refugees crossed into South Sudan, and it's just crazy. And what you see here, these are not tents; these are actually, women. They use their tops
Mm.
to create
Shade.
something to shield from the sun.
Mm.
Yeah. And right after that difficult trip to cross the border, to travel from Drenk in northern South Sudan
Mm.
to Juba, where services are a little bit better. Um, it's either you fly a very expensive flight that almost all these people cannot afford,
Mm-hmm.
or you take the long route of Malakal,
Mm-hmm.
and people use these metal barges to travel upriver. The trip from Renk to Malakal is 320 kilometers, but on those metal boats, it takes 2 days
Oh my
on
god.
the boat. Yep.
And I'm guessing.
And if you look closer, you'll find people's head appearing from inside the boat. This boat is long and slim, but it takes up to 300, 400 passengers,
Is it this one? This is the boat?
just like this.
Yeah.
Yes. What you see right now is actually the top layer of people. There are people inside the boat.
Oh my god. And
It's,
is this a safe trip? It's not, right?
it's not safe at all. It's not safe at all. If um, people are not allowed to take so much weight,
But they do.
you drink water directly from the river,
Oh my.
and just imagine being cramped in there for 2 days.
And did you take that one?
Yeah.
You did. Yeah. Simply, you're telling me this. Okay. That's true.
One of the stories that I always keep on getting back. Her story was unique because she was born in Saudi
Mm.
and she never saw Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
She finished her high school in Saudi and wanted to do medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So just like your case, the first time for her in Sudan was on the 2nd of April.
Mm-hmm.
She came to Sudan with her mother
Mm-hmm.
and father,
Mm.
trying to. I think she was already accepted to one of the universities, so she wanted to do medicine in Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
And just a couple of weeks after she arrived, conflict happened.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, this is her first time ever
In Sudan.
to be in Sudan.
And that's what she experienced.
Yeah.
Very sad.
Um, after the conflict started on the third day,
Mm-hmm.
her uncle and her father went out to bring more supplies, food, and so on, and they never returned. And until now, they have no
Idea
idea
where they
where they
are.
are or what happened. So with her mother, they fled. They just kept on going with no plan, going away from the war. They went south to White Nile State. From White Nile, from Adwem, they went to Kosti, to Rabak, and this picture was taken in Rank,
Mm.
where they wanted to apply for the refugee card, and they have no plan what to do, where to go. In Saudi, they used to depend on their father's income. That's yeah, but now the father's not there. They lost their documents, their passports, and everything.
Yeah,
And this image was taken in November, and they are still trapped in South Sudan.
they're still there. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing the pictures with me and the audience. Honestly, I don't want to cry. I'm trying to hide the crying with a smile.
I know that feeling.
It just, I don't feel like I have the right to cry because I'm safe, right? Um, there was like, I don't know what to do. You know, I am trapped with my feelings, and I feel
Along the way, I've seen this is just a small selection of people I talk to. Sometimes it's even difficult to um, to portray the people after you hear their stories. Sometimes you feel it somehow invades their privacy if you publish a story. I've edited here so much, and these are the few that agreed, and I was feeling actually it's okay to bring their stories across. But in every space I went to, just imagine it's thousands of people with their own individual stories, and this is still happening.
yeah, they're still there. You know, my own family, my uncles, right? Actually,
Mm.
2 days ago, my uncle first child was born. My cousin, she's a girl,
Mm.
and they were waiting for that girl for 7 years, and
Wow.
they were told they can't have
In
children.
Sudan.
Yeah, they were in Medini, and
Wow.
you know, the I can't share the full story here, but for 7 years they were told they can't have children, and then imagine mid-war. My uncle wife was like, "You're pregnant." I was like, "What do you mean?" Right? Even us, we knew, like, and of course we didn't have contact with them. They were thinking, are they alive? And the news comes,
Mm.
they're not just alive, they're expecting. And
Wow.
I was like, wow, what do you mean? What do you mean? You know, we were like, what's gonna happen? I was talking to my uncle. I was like, you need to cross the border, and he's like, my wife can't cross the border. She has to deliver here. And Medani was invaded, and I call it invasion because
Mm.
it is. We're being
It
invaded by
is.
our own.
It was surprised.
Yeah, the army is not defending anyone. Medani's situation was very interesting because the army said, we're here, we're protecting you. The next day, the rabbit forces,
They left.
they left them. They left the people. They
They
left
left.
their own
They
people.
left. It was sold
It
out.
was sold
Medellin
out.
was sold.
It was sold. Yeah. So many was sold to to the rabbit forces, and the next day, you know, everyone is being killed, everyone is fleeing, you know, or like
Mm-hmm.
the stories are horrible stories, and what my uncle family is one of those stories who like went to a village. Unfortunately, the village so far is safe until she delivered 2 days ago,
Oh,
and
Alhamdulillah, salam.
Allah Salamak. And like when I was talking to him, I was like, the moment this kid comes out, we're just gonna hit the street and cross the border. But what I'm thinking about is the kid is the baby able to make the journey? You know,
It's difficult.
it's difficult. It's difficult. And this is the reality of situation. And the reality of these people are so heartbreaking to us who are safe. And it's the fact that I feel trapped. You know,
and there's nothing much you could do.
nothing. You can speak. You can lose your voice speaking and people would still ignore you. You know?
Yeah.
And the only thing I can think about is at least I will make videos, I will record it somehow, and in the far future, someone would know the truth. It's not just another African country. It's not a civil war. It's a story of each individual Sudani person who lost so much, like the last story. She doesn't know where her father and her uncle are at. The first time she comes back to her country. And why did her father left the country in the first place? Because it was not a good country to provide for a family. So he took his family to go to a place and live, oh, God knows what kind of life to provide. Right? Then he comes with his daughter to a country for her to lose him. If I were her, I would hate Sudan.
Exactly, that's what happened actually. The first memory ever of Sudan, it is the most painful and life-changing experience. Her life will change completely after what happened.
Yeah, she lost a lot. Future father, and
One thing I remember she told me actually is she felt guilty that her decision to pursue medicine brought them back to Sudan.
Yeah.
And she's just 18. She's 18.
She's blaming
already,
herself.
Blaming herself. Her father is not there, and her uncle is not there. She's crazy.
She's blaming herself, and that's it is unfortunate, but that's trauma response to what's happening right now, right? How do you feel
after talking?
After taking these pictures, after living this experience, how do you see life? How do you feel about Sudan in general? I know you have the duty of a photographer, but what else? As a human being who has a father, as a husband and a son, how do you feel?
It is not easy to think about connecting again with a place that I think the best way to describe it is actually cursed. There's so much have been happening, and would it be logical just to forget about it and move on, just like so many people did? Or is it logical to try to take part on somehow helping to make it a better place? As I mentioned, I have nothing to do with politics, but would my voice help in changing things? Because at the end, the whole situation is created over a fight of power. Being in such places, I think it makes me believe more on the duty, and that's why I always think that my trip to Chad is important, because no one will do it. I know, I'm sure, I'm certain you will never hear about what's going on in Chad.
No.
But numbers throughout my trip inside Sudan, to the camps in South Sudan, the numbers you hear or you see on official reports, it's usually quite less than the reality. And I think Chad is an extreme situation, and it has so many layers of pain to it. People from Chad had endured extreme form of treatment by the RSF soldiers, and comparing it to the war in Khartoum and Madani, I have a friend who works for Reuters, and they spent a week in Adrid, in Chad, uh, focusing more on women from Guinea. And they say that 1 out of 3 women they interviewed in that particular area in the camp was raped. And numbers like these are scary indicators, but at the end, reports will never show the reality. I think I can do something reflecting some part of the story and in conveying how people feel or felt. But my link to Sudan and the Sudanese story will not end here. Will end soon. However, I don't see a positive sign for something good that will happen to the country in the coming few years. It does not look good. Change usually comes in extreme conditions, but I think the war in Sudan has changed nothing. It is the same political and cultural dialogue. It's the same mentality, and it does not look good.
What would you tell Sudani people who didn't see what you saw, and how do you think they should help? Because I know they're sending funds. I know there's a lot of initiatives happening, but as someone who's been there, saw it all, in my opinion, and heard so many stories, because what I'm hearing from you, what you're telling us right now, is not even 0.1% of what's actually happening. It's just a very little of what's happening. So what would you tell us as Sudani people who are living abroad, the diaspora people, the
I
people who, like me, for example?
I think the country needs a lot of support. Sudanese people need lots of support, and regardless of what we hear in the news and so on, I think we all have families back home. Just try to connect with people around us and help people who are in need for help. I think every Sudanese family have some relatives somewhere outside, and if we started supporting and helping those who are near us, somehow we could, provide support, because we are in a time that only 5% of Sudanese have access to jobs, and 5% is a very small number. The country is suffering, and all the support we are getting is fragments of what really people need. Think about people who escaped Sudan, living in camps in different countries, people who moved to other countries with the dream of getting a job, and they end up being trapped. Even here in UAE, I know so many people who came here and now they are trapped because there are basically no jobs. And the same for people who went to Qatar, Egypt, Kenya, Uganda.
Yeah.
But let's start helping those who are in need the most at the moment. People who are still trapped in the country, and people who are stranded in camps around neighboring countries. Let's talk more about Sudan. Let's bring awareness to what's happening in Sudan worldwide.
You're saying it
News
became a
agencies
duty
will always,
to talk.
yes, news agencies will always look at these things as, is it key event or no? Does it bring more views or not? And unfortunately, a war that's going on for a year is not
It's
just
old
another
news.
headline. It will be a footer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old news.
Sad.
And nobody cares. Nobody cares about Sudan unless we care about Sudan.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a duty for every Sudani person to do something about it. I agree
Yes.
with you. My next question, and we're ending soon, is what would you tell people who are not Sudanese, who are watching you right now after you've been through all of this? What do you need from them, or what would you tell them?
I think if this war was not there, I would ask them to get to know more about Sudan. Um, there's a lot about us as a country,
Mm.
as people, as history,
Culture.
and at this moment, I would tell them to get to know more about what's going on in Sudan. There's a lot of talks about the war in Sudan, but very few people are talking about what's happened to the Sudanese people
Mm.
and the scale, the numbers, and the amount of damage that people went through and are still going through at the moment. It's way too much than anyone could imagine.
Mhm.
I've been to camps. I've been to Somalia. I've been to Niger. I've been to Central African Republic during the conflict. But the numbers I saw in Sudan conflict is just different.
Yeah. I wish that I knew we're humans. We're not just numbers. We're not just another conflict in Africa. In fact, all Africa is important,
Mhm.
but we're humans being with stories, with dreams. One of them wanted to go to med school, but the next few days lost a father and uncle. One lost two kids. One never had a bed before. Like, the stories are heartbreaking and they're human, and it could be anyone. It's cliche to say that. I know, but that's the situation, right?
It's a reality.
It's the reality we're living. Yeah. I'm grateful for you. I lived 7 years in Sudan, in Medani. In my elementary school, I love Sudan.
And in Omdurman.
And I lived 3 years in Omdurman, right? I love Sudan
Mm.
very much. I'm just angry, you know? I'm angry that we let Sudan, we let it. We allow this to happen as Sudanese people. And I know the war is proxy war. I know there's a lot of big governments and there's a lot of things behind the picture. But at the end of the day, at some point, we could have become a great nation, but we chose our differences. We held into our ego of who we belong to, and we forgot to belong to ourselves.
Mhm.
And
I think you put the right nail into it. Ego. That's what's happening.
what happened is ego, and ego destroyed a full nation, right? And instead of bringing it together, and it's unfortunate because Sudanese people have so many they have so many possibilities, or like in the future, but we chose the wrong choice. And I do believe every one of us who stayed, who left, who's a photographer, who's a doctor, who's a politician, we're all responsible for this. All of us are responsible for this. Parents should have taught their kids how to handle the differences. The curriculum should have been different, right? We should have put aside
Mm.
all these political, parties happen because each person had an ego and wanted his idea to be right and wanted their vision to. I'm not saying his because I feel like men started this. Sorry, but that's the truth.
Well, to be true, that's actually the case.
Yeah,
It's a group of
it's
men,
a
as
group
I
of
said
men
at the beginning.
all the time. Group of
Group
men,
group group of old men.
old men decided this is the way Sudan should be, and divided and
Mm.
kept divided more and more. While I see what you see about hope, and how I don't see the hope the same way you see it, and how the conflict is gonna go. Whatever the data we have, whatever we see right now, is for it to go down, more down. But I do have some faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a miracle could happen,
Mm.
right? And I pray, you and I
Mm.
right now pray for everyone safety, and for the people like you and I who have families back home, for them to be safe, and for a better future for the next Sudani generation, and for less division. For God's sake, stop it. You know what I mean? As Sudani people, at least
Inshallah.
come together. Come together. You know.
Inshallah.
Um, I am honored to have you, and I've learned so much from you. Right? I have.
Thank you, Allah. It was good to to talk about it at least.
Mhm.
Yeah, as we say, in a way or another, we just try to keep the conversation about what's going on.
Yes, yes, I agree. We have to keep the conversation. It's our duty, like what you say, to keep talking about it, whatever platform your audience, bring it forward. Even if you share the flag, someone will say, what flag it is? It's Sudan flag. What's happening in Sudan?
Mhm.
So please, please, please don't forget about Sudan. We are a human who needs your help, and this is the least you can do as a human being. I'm very proud again to have you, the pictures you've taken, the talent you have, the responsibility, duty, selfishness. I know I called you selfish, but I don't think you are. I was picking on you. I was picking on you, and you triggered like some childhood memories. I was like, let me pick on that side of you. But thank you so much. You've honored me here. And yeah,
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
yes, it was a pleasure. Thank you all for watching or listening to the Lemon Native of Sabreen.